Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
The hypocrisy of it is obviously you see in our leaders how the rules don't apply to them, or how they can just make a quick decision and allow like a mass gathering, whether that was last June with Black Lives Matter or this June with that vigil in London, Ontario. And so they can massage and adjust the rules, and even the Sky Palace with Jason Kenney, they make the laws for us, but then they live outside that law.
Adam Soos here for Rebel News, and I am outside of the church of Pastor Tim Stevens, Fairview Baptist Church in Calgary. The doors behind me are the very doors on which the locks were changed, barring access for the congregants to enter for worship. This is the second building that has been effectively seized by Alberta Health Services simply because congregants continued to gather for worship. One of the great ironies is that Jason Kenney simply flouts these regulations at will without consequence in his Sky Palace. But apparently when Christian pastors do it, it's grounds for buildings being locked up and pastors being thrown in jail. I'm going to be joined by Pastor Tim Stevens in just a moment, who's going to share about the experience of his building being locked down and how the congregation plans to proceed with worship despite the loss of access to this building.
Well, I actually got an email from someone in the media asking to do an interview about our building being closed. So it was news to me, and so did some more digging and actually came over here just to double check that it was indeed locked. They changed the locks and barred the other doors into the building. And so then had to let our congregation know that Alberta Health Services had essentially seized our church and taken our private property.
Unbelievable. And it's a bizarre pattern. One thing that we've noticed, certainly, the media seems to be getting this information, mainstream media, before anyone else. Every time a lot of police vehicles would show up, all the mainstream media outlets would just depart. So there's clearly some internal communications that we as normal citizens aren't privy to. So maybe there's another story to look into there. What was the reaction from your congregation, though, to this news?
Well, we knew this may be coming, because what has so astounded us in this past year is just how much authority and power the government has, and how they essentially do what they want without any kind of accountability. And so for them to come and to take our building, just like they've done to Grace Life Church, we knew it was a possibility. We know ultimately at the end of the day, it's not about science, it's not about the data, because there's never been an outbreak at our church. No one's ever gotten sick through the ministry or the gatherings related to our church. And what's sad about them coming and taking our personal and private property here is that there's no accountability, there's no recourse. So the courts still haven't talked about even the constitutionality of these orders, and here we are like 15, 16 months since this began. And so really the government is doing these actions, and there's no real accountability to them, and there's no way that we can really work with them. And we understand that we're in the minority in terms of our convictions about gathering during COVID-19, but the laws of our land are there to protect the minority from the majority and from essentially the power of the government.
So on the note of a lack of accountability, we saw the sort of now viral sensation. There's been international news about Jason Kenney himself in the Sky Palace repeatedly flouting these very rules that you're now being held to account. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, what's sad is how inconsistent the rules have been. And so the message that we always hear is that these restrictions and measures are all based upon science and the data, but you never really offer us all the information that they say that they're using to make these decisions. But then it's clear how inconsistent they are, just the rules in general, how inconsistent they are, and how discriminatory they are to places of worship and to people who have the convictions that we must worship God in this way. And then the hypocrisy of it is obviously you see in our leaders how the rules don't apply to them, or how they can just make a quick decision and allow like a mass gathering, whether that was last June with Black Lives Matter or this June with that vigil in London, Ontario. And so they can massage and adjust the rules, and even the Sky Palace with Jason Kenney, they make the laws for us, but then they live outside that law.
Certainly unbelievable. Now, for the second time, your church went underground. If these politicians think worship will stop, you've made clear repeatedly that is not a possibility. Worship will continue. Can you tell us about the experience, maybe without disclosing the location or anything, but about the experience?
Yeah, I can't say where, but we did gather, and it was actually last Saturday when they closed our church. We had to find a place to meet, and the forecast was not good. It was supposed to be cold and rainy. And so I jokingly thought that they're going to force us outside, and someone might get sick being outside in the cold, rainy weather. But thankfully, God was so gracious to us. The sun shined upon us, and it was a wonderful time of worship. and people were overjoyed. And so it just goes to show for the amount of clamoring that the government might do to try to close and stop what we're doing. They really can't stop because these convictions are so strong and deep within the members of our congregation and church, and we're serving a higher authority than even our governing authorities. We're trying to serve God and live for Him, and so that will always be our commitment.
And I had the opportunity to attend. I want to thank you for that opportunity, for being able to attend on Sunday. And I can relate that despite the building being locked down, the spirit was of joy. Can you maybe talk about the resilience or the unmutable joy of your congregants, despite all these hardships you're undergoing?
Yeah, no, the congregation has been overjoyed because it has forced them to count the cost of what it means to truly follow Jesus. And so when their faith and when their commitments are tested, there is a joy in doing what we believe is right and following God and living for the Lord Jesus Christ. And so there is real joy and anticipation, and it's not just our own congregation, but each and every week we have others from other congregations in Calgary coming to join us. And so it seems that the more the government presses to try to suppress our gatherings, it just encourages more and more people who want to be a part of those gatherings, because there is a real joy and a real sense of anticipation for hearing the word preached, for being together in fellowship. People just want to live normally. They want to live the way that God has made us to live, in relationships and gathering together to worship Him.
And that's certainly true of Christian history in general, as the government continues to provide pressure. That steel is almost tempered and worship continues. In fact, worship grows. I want to thank you for your bold stance in opposition to these restrictions, for calling out the hypocrisy boldly, and for continuing to stand for your congregants. It's not just you alone. Your entire family of faith is together in this, and that is glowingly clear. So we commend you. And again, our viewers have been following this story from the beginning. We thank you for sharing this with us, for inviting us in to be part of this story. Again, thank you so much, Pastor Tim Stevens, and thank you everyone for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. Pastor Tim Stevens is very lucky to have exceptional representation from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. But he's not the only pastor facing persecution right now. Pastor Artur Pawlowski, as you well know, is facing a serious court date coming up on June 28th. He needs all the help he can get. So if you're able to make a contribution, go to saveartur.com.